Nothing, baby. Let's go. That's the world now. That's the whole world.
Welcome to the Lone Star College Football Show. I'm your host, Chris Daly. Each episode, I will bring you news and information about college football in Texas, not just the FBS school, anyone who plays college football in the great state of Texas. I will do so by talking with the people making it happen on the gridiron, the head coaches, the staff, the players, but mostly the head coaches. Thank you for joining us. Hey, it's not too early to start thinking about the perfect Christmas gift. Yes, if you have college football lovers in your life, they are going to love the board game Saturday Legends. Saturday Legends allows you to play the greatest college football teams of all time against each other based on their real stats. Included in the base set, 2005 Texas, 2001 Miami, 2019 LSU, 1995 Nebraska, 2014 Ohio State, 1945 Army, 1988 Oklahoma State, 2018 Clemson, 2009 Florida, and 1972 USC. And those are just a fraction of the amazing, historically great teams available in the Saturday Legends library. To get your Christmas shopping out of the way early and save money, go to SaturdayLegends.com. Use the code LONESTAR for 10% off your order. That's SaturdayLegends.com.
All right, intern Nohe, for those that don't know, you do an NFL podcast here on the network, Outdrink the Coverage. Now we're bringing you in to talk a little college football. Now, you're interesting because you have no true college football allegiance, do you?
No, I don't, but also, thanks for calling me interesting. The nicest thing you've ever said to me.
Oh, I know, buddy. But, I mean, seriously, you love college football as much as I do, but you don't have a rooting interest. Not saying you don't tend to end up rooting for, like, a team in a year and stuff, but I enjoy your feedback on college because you honestly you don't have any kind of, burnt orange or Aggie maroon or TCU purple glasses. You just call it like you see it.
I do call it like I see it, and I went to UT Arlington for college. We'll talk about them later because it's kind of relevant. But, I just never grew up. Like, when I grew up, I liked teams with, colors or uniforms I liked. Mm-hmm. So, actually, when I was a kid, I liked the Aggies.
Oh, yeah, I do remember you saying that. No, you know me. I'm a fan of Texas, but I don't hate on any other schools. I just hate on some fan bases, but that's just all for fun.
I was going to say I also like Penn State and Florida State, too, because when I grew up, Charlie Ward was pretty big, and that 94 Penn State team that really should have had a share at that national title. It was, those like kind of my influences and what got me into watching college football. But yeah, now I just root for underdogs. I'll usually root for a Texas school if they're playing. But yeah, I mean, I still love watching college football. I love the atmosphere, the competition, the fans are great. It's just, it definitely hits you a different way than the NFL does.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And you and I have even talked about it. Half of what we watch NFL for is because we do fantasy football and we like the Red Zone channel. And I don't know if it wasn't for Red Zone channel or fantasy football, I would be like my dad who basically watches the Cowboys every week, and then that's about it on the NFL.
Yeah, I could totally see myself doing the same exact thing, man.
Yeah, and college, even when my team's not good, and they haven't been for a very long time, I just like to watch college football, and I like to watch Texas, and I mean the state of Texas college football. So that's why we're on the show, and let's jump into it, and we'll start with my Longhorns. They once again have a 31-17 lead, a two-score lead over an opponent. They once again give that up and lose. Now, the positive is it's been to two top 10 teams or top 10 adjacent teams, but it's also in a road game to Texas Tech, and they've been weird losses, a field goal by Alabama, a fumble by Texas, and an interception by Texas. So there's a lot to love, but there's also a lot to hate with what the Horns are doing right now.
Well, one thing to love is Bijan Robinson. I mean, he had a pretty good game, man, 140 yards and a touchdown, and Got another long touchdown pass through the air, 41 yards. I will say this: I wasn't particularly impressed with Quinn Ewers as far as his completion percentage goes.
No, I think that whole 14 minutes against Bama and then beating OU, I think people may have crowned him a little too early. I said this after the Iowa State game. I think Hudson Card should at least be in battle for the position during practices, and I'll say it especially after this game. At the end of the day, I hate to say he lost the game, but yeah, he couldn't hit wide open receivers. And I know the wind was bothersome, but Oklahoma State's quarterback Spencer Sanders, he was completing passes in it too. He missed, and he missed badly. And I like Bijan, but I will say this: it feels like whenever Texas needs to run to grind a game out in that third and fourth quarter, those gaps get a little tighter, and that's where you need Ewers to be able to hit a big third down in 5 or hit a big third down in 6. And that's part of why I think you're seeing Texas fade at the end of the games.
I just think Ewers needs to take care of that mullet he has. It doesn't look good. That's one problem for Texas. But I will say this: they've been doing a lot of great recruiting since Sarkisian's become the head coach. Oklahoma State, they came off a loss, and you and I talk a lot about this on the NFL side, where good teams coming off a loss, they're very hard to beat again, and it was in Oklahoma State. So I wasn't expecting the Longhorns to win, but watching the game play out the way it did, I'm kind of disappointed in how they just let another lead slip away.
Exactly. It's one of those that you don't expect them to win, but damn it, they put themselves in position to win, and then it gets taken away. That's just as frustrating. What wasn't frustrating was number 8 TCU as they beat Kansas State, number 17 in the nation, 38-28. That's TCU's 4th straight win over a ranked opponent. They came back again, but then you go back to TCU struggled early, and this isn't the same Kansas State team that throttled Oklahoma. They're kind of banged up without their starting QB. I think they were without 2 offensive linemen. I would have liked to have seen TCU get up early and stretch that out instead of having to come back.
Yeah, they should not have let this game be as close as it was early on. Even though Kansas State's a well-coached team, and I like their future with their new head coach, I still think that TCU was a much better team. Kudos to TCU for overcoming the deficit, because they could have just clearly buckled, but they're Max Duggan, the quarterback, who was, I think, benched.
Yes.
Or he wasn't starting earlier this season, and then starting quarterback got, I think, an ankle sprain or something. Couldn't play the next game. And then Duggan, take to his credit, 19 touchdowns and only 1 interception since. The TCU, is looking even better than they did last year and they have Gary Patterson as their head coach, and they had, Zach Evans as their running back. And this year now they have Sonny Dykes as their head coach and Kendra Miller as their running back. And they just look so much better. And I'm very happy for them. It's starting to make me think they could probably run the table. Looking at their remaining schedule, they play West Virginia in Morgantown next week. I think that's very winnable. We'll talk about Texas Tech later, but I think after West Virginia, they play Tech, and that'll be a very tough matchup for them. Joey McGuire is doing a really good job.
Well, I read, I think it was Ivan Maisel was in his athletic app mailbag. Somebody talked about TCU, and they were talking about, where does a TCU, if they finish at 12-1, where do they rank, and does that put them in the playoffs? And he was talking about their schedule, and I think he said it best. He goes, I look at who TCU has left, and I can see them running the table. I can see them losing every game. I do feel at times TCU's a little bit of smoke and mirrors this year, and that's always a compliment. Some people take that like that's a not. That's always a compliment to the coach, because that means basically they're out coaching a lot of teams, and that tends to catch up. And you have to remember, Sonny Dykes, the one negative about him is his teams tend to start strong and then fade down the stretch. And I think part of that is the coaching with mirrors, and teams make adjustments down the road, and it's hard to at some point it's not about adjustments, it's about talent. And TCU is talented, but they're still going to be talent deficient in most of these games going on the rest of the year.
And to further talk about Sonny Dykes, usually his teams in the first year are not that great.
Good point.
Now, the point you were talking about was the years that are really good, like I guess 2019 SMU or 2015 California. Those are teams that started off strong, like you were saying, they faded. But this is the first time. So Sonny Dykes, I mean, he's 3 times he's led programs from losing records to winning records before he departed. So he's definitely a pretty solid coach. This is the first time he's ever had a hot start in his first year with the team. So this is kind of uncharted territory for him. And I'm looking at the remaining schedule. The home game against Tech and the road game against the Longhorns will probably be his toughest test for the season. And if they get through that, I think they win at Baylor. I think they win their last game home against Iowa State. So it's definitely going to be an interesting final 5 games for TCU.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I agree with Mazel, because I could see TCU easily losing one of those games and it start a bump, because, I mean, going into back-to-back, going into Texas, going into Baylor, that's tough. Then you've got Texas Tech, and then always confusing Iowa State. It's like Iowa State is so jealous of Iowa Hawkeyes that they just now are like them. Every year we go, man, Iowa State, they're going to be the team to beat. Watch out for them. And then they'll lose a couple games early, and you go, oh, well, man, they're not that good. And then they'll get hot at the end of the year and win 2 or 3 games they shouldn't, and you get back into that next year. Hey, Iowa State, they're looking really good. I don't know what to think about them. But, yeah, the Big 12, for all the jokes about the Big 12 and all that, I think the Big 12 this year is absolutely fun. Like, you don't know who's going to win week to week. There is no guaranteed, hey, these are our teams that are going to play in the Big 12 championship game. So I'm enjoying it from that aspect.
I am enjoying it from that aspect as well. And there's a lot of close games. The rise of Kansas, I know they're fading now. We'll talk about them later. But, I mean, it's a pretty interesting year. Oklahoma is a little bit down. Injury to the quarterback position, but still, it's still up in the air. But I mean, these 2 teams that we saw play on Saturday, those are probably TCU and Oklahoma State are probably the class of the conference this year. And I'm not sure if either one of them will still make it into the playoffs.
Or again, either one of them even make it to the Big 12 championship game. I'm telling you, there's a lot more to the Big 12 story this year. Let's go ahead and talk about the next 2, Texas Tech and West Virginia. Texas Tech should have won that game. I think the thing I'm impressed is they won that game, and they won it a lot over West Virginia. That West Virginia's not a great team this year, but they can still muck you up. And I thought Texas Tech stayed above that and dominated, when one of the things about the Raiders is, how is it going to be when they're playing not Texas that's ranked and at home? How are they going to be on the road or against an average team? And I thought that was a good response for Tech.
It was, and they won it a different way. And they won it on the turnovers. They got 4 turnovers against West Virginia. That's uncharacteristic for their defense to do that this year. But hey, I work at Only Gas, and there's a lot of Red Raiders alums that work in the industry, and they tell me they love Joey McGuire.
Oh yeah,
a UT Arlington graduate.
That's what I knew. That when you said that earlier, I knew that's what you're gonna call. Look, this is what I've said about Joey McGuire. He plays well in the West Texas small school living rooms to the parents, but he has DFW skins on the wall, being a successful high school coach in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for 15, 20 years. So he is that middle guy that Texas Tech is always needing, that can recruit the athleticism of DFW and recruit the athleticism of Houston, but still be able to get the small town big boys, the corn eaters, the beef eaters, your offensive linemen and stuff, and your defensive line and stuff. And I think him at Texas Tech, and I think Dykes funny enough, Dykes, who his dad was the legend at Texas Tech. I think Dykes at TCU, I think both of them will end up staying as long as they want at both of those jobs and have a lot of success.
Oh, yeah, for sure. 100%. I just, going back to Joey McGuire, I just realized he was at Cedar Hill for about 20 years.
Yeah, led them to their state championships and all their successes.
Hey, future for Big 12, even when Texas and Oklahoma are departing pretty soon.
Well,
still looks pretty bright.
Well, and that's going to be the big if the Big 12, if Tech and TCU can keep them. I think if they can keep them through the transition, they'll stay. But what if I'm naming a school, and I don't mean necessarily the school because they have Mike Leach, but like a Mississippi State comes calling. Does that pull to the Power 5? Because we don't know if the Big 12 is going to still be in that Power 5. Does that pull in this weird transition of 4 years? Because it's came out that basically Texas and OU are going to stay through the contract. So we've got 3 more years of the Big 12. So that's also 3 more years of, we don't know what's going to happen. So it's up to the Big 12 to pull some teams in, or they might lose a Dykes or a McGuire to a lower level SEC. I could see a Vanderbilt wanting a Dykes or a McGuire because they play well. Like we said, they play well in the living rooms that those schools would be able to get into. And I'm curious about Baylor. Look what they did. And you talked about Kansas. You feel bad for Kansas. Kansas, I think, is still a competitive team, and I still think that they can do some great things. But if Kansas doesn't lose their quarterback, I think they had a chance to have a really magical year.
And we have to take a second to thank our title sponsor this year, Junior's Smokehouse. Yeah, Junior's Smokehouse, you can find at juniorsjerky.com. They have everything you can imagine: pork and venison sausage, beef sausage, all kinds of great dried meats, jerkies, wonderful spices, rubs, you name it. In fact, you have to go check out the website just to figure it out. There's great gift boxes. And I have to tell you, if you want to guarantee that your gift is ready by Christmas, make sure you go online and place your order before December 13th. They get very busy sending out probably the most wonderful gift you can give somebody for Christmas: some beef jerky, some dried sausage, some good manly food. That's Junior Smokehouse on Highway 59 in Texas between Wharton and El Campo. But again, you can find all of it online at juniorsjerky.com. You can also reach owner Lane Tabola and his staff at 979-531-0888. You can order online, you can order on the phone, you can go by like I do. Luckily, I'm so close to it. And check out some of the amazing processed meats they have. Such good stuff. That's Junior's Texas Best Smokehouse.
I want to move over to Baylor, because Baylor has a little connection with what sideline to sideline.
Wait a minute.
What?
What head coach for Kansas are you referring to?
Your former coach,
David Beatty?
Yes. I think his recruiting, I legitimately think his recruiting inroads deserve some credit, because they didn't just recruit all these players this year. Some of these players have been there for 2 years. I was watching the packages about Kansas, and they were talking to some juniors and sophomores, and they were talking about, hey, he sold me on the idea of Kansas and stuff. And so I do think he deserves a little bit more credit than what people want to give him.
Hey, more power to him. I know it wasn't a great run at Kansas, but David Beatty, I mean, to your point, Les Miles was there in 2019 and 2020 and won a combined 3 games.
I think Miles was just grabbing a check at that point. I think that was just a terrible hire all around. It put that program back 2 more years than I think they would have been closer to where they can be if they wouldn't have hired Miles. And I'm not saying keeping Beatty, fire Beatty, but not bringing Les Miles. That was just a weird hire from the beginning.
Yeah. And hey, Leipold, he did it at Buffalo, and he's doing it at Kansas. I kind of want to see what their 2024 team looks like. There's a lot of promise there with the Jayhawks.
Oh yeah, and they've had enough success that they can make themselves look attractive in the portal for transfer players who might be coming, third string or second string at some of the bigger schools. Being like, I can go to Kansas right now and not only play, but we're good enough that we could compete. And they competed this week. Baylor kind of grinded them down. Baylor won 35-23. Richard Reese, I know very well. He's from Belleville, 4A school. I cover them on sideline to sideline. He's a freshman, and he went off 186 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I'll tell you, he's just like J.K. Dobbins from LaGrange. He has the body to be an NFL back. If he can stay healthy and if he can mature, I mean, him as a freshman is already outmanning some of the defenses that he was running up and over Kansas, and I was very impressed with him. And I'm still very impressed with Baylor. I still think Baylor, again, that they haven't finished telling the Big 12 story this year.
I think, I mean, they're 4-3 now, 2-2 in conference play. It's not like they've been blown out in their 3 losses. They lost at BYU by 6, home to Oklahoma State by about 10, and then the West Virginia loss in Morgantown was probably the roughest one.
Yeah,
because that should have been a win. And now, you know, Baylor goes to Tech, they go to Oklahoma, and then home versus Kansas State and TCU, and then close out in Austin. So I'm not sure. I can see them getting to 6 wins, maybe 7, but there was higher expectations after the first few games of the year.
Well, and I think what we're realizing now, in my opinion, is that Baylor it was a great story last year, but they did it by grinding teams down. And I think if an Oklahoma State team is healthier, that game goes completely different. But I still think Baylor can pull. When I say that, I still think they're going to help tell the Big 12 story. I think they have an upset or 2 left in them. I think that they can still beat a TCU or a Texas or a Kansas State, and especially when 2 of those 3 games are at Baylor, and Baylor has become where they're really hard to beat at home because of that defense. Their issue is they don't really have a quarterback, and they don't really have an offense unless they're going to lean on Richard Reese the rest of the year. They don't really have an offense that you can count on. And saying that, they've been scoring points, but it's coming at different ways, and that's a positive. But I would like to say, okay, Baylor has a quarterback. Baylor can go and win every game with that, but I still think they have a chance. I'll tell you who doesn't have a chance. That's A&M. I don't know if I've seen a collapse as epic as A&M. They lose to South Carolina 30-24. It comes back down to what you and I talked about off the air, Nohe. Like, everybody was pointing to them this year, and I'm thinking, well, really, it's going to be like next year or the next year. I thought A&M was a little too highly rated to begin this year, and we're seeing that.
Well, I mean, you can understand why they were highly rated. They have the coach that's a master recruiter, and they have the top-ranked recruiting class. They had a pretty solid 2021. You know, you'd think after a few years, these highly rated recruits are maturing and they're ready for the big time. But, you know, A&M, it's not like this team was getting whooped. They lost a very close road game to Alabama. Their low losses this year have not been by much. South Carolina. I want to talk more about as much about South Carolina as I want to do A&M, just because, you know, Frank's son has Beamer Ball coming back.
Beamer Ball is rocking.
They started that game with a kickoff return for a touchdown. That's the most Frank Beamer type thing. And it would even be more is if they had a punt block. You know, that was as a kid watching Virginia Tech, the 90s and 2000s, it was like they had a punt block every week. It was just special teams was just their thing, and that's kind of how it turned out to be in this game. And A&M just got in that 17-0 hole, and it was hard for them to come out of. Kudos to them for coming back. But, you know, same thing with Kansas. Injuries are just going to hurt this team. And in this case, it was special teams and turnovers. Okay, back to A&M. Jumbo Fisher is making $9 million a year, so he's definitely staying.
Is he?
A&M, he's making that's a lot of money.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the schools don't pay the buyouts; the boosters do. And as much as that sounds, I think it's a $96 million buyout. As big as that sounds, A&M has the boosters who could fund that. Now, do they want to? I don't know. Is it too early? Yeah, I think so. I think you're about to see Jimbo kind of have a Mac Brown type run at A&M. with Alabama being their Oklahoma, where you might see A&M have a few years where their only losses to Bama, or when Texas and them get in, we'll see. But I think people need to push the brake on getting rid of Jimbo Fisher. Again, I know they had the number one class this year, but they're all freshmen, and I know freshmen impact the game all the time. But if you really thought that every freshman from the recruiting class was going to come in and start and dominate, then I think you had pie in the sky views of A&M, and I think that's the bigger issue. I think the expectations of A&M need to throttle back and let's see if he can build.
History has shown that losing to South Carolina hasn't been good for some head coaches, some prominent head coaches.
Yeah, don't they have a weird thing where like 4 or 5 head coaches have been fired right after or in the season losing to South Carolina?
Philip Fulmer in 2008 for Tennessee, Will Muschamp in 2014, and Dan Mullen last year for Florida all lost their jobs like right after, like a week or two after losing to the Gamecocks. So it's pretty interesting.
Well, and I think the other issue that A&M now has is they're having some in the locker room issues. A few players have been suspended. There's talk of a few players not wanting to practice. So if you're going to knock Jimbo Fisher or question what's going on, is can he keep that locker room together as they continue to grow as a program? That is a true situation that needs to be figured out, because that also happened before Miami. So this is the second time they've had, and it's all freshmen, and that speaks to kids who are not getting to play as much as they're used to. So they have more time on their hand, and they're getting into trouble. And so I do think Jimbo Fisher needs to figure that out.
Yeah, I think he does too, but it could just be youth. So maybe by next year, some of these guys will start wising up. Now I was looking at their schedule. It could just be just the road woes, because their last 3 losses were on the road. Next week they play a home game against a very good Ole Miss team who's coming off a loss, so that'll be a tough matchup. At least they'll be in College Station, and they get Florida at home after that, at Auburn, and then they close out against UMass and home against LSU. So I can see them at least beating UMass and maybe Florida. Ole Miss if they get lucky, but Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin's got them. It's a pretty solid team, and they had the crushing loss to LSU, but they're a pretty solid team.
I think one thing though you and I are doing right now is we're talking at this through an NFL lens, where we've seen it how many times a team will start strong or they hit a stretch and they just crumble. I don't think that happens as much as college. College, every game is a game in of itself, and I think that's where you see teams like we talk about Iowa State. They'll struggle, but then they still end up winning some big games at the end of the year. I don't have any reservation thinking that A&M could upset Ole Miss. I have no reservation at that at all, because I don't trust Ole Miss. Ole Miss, they can look like world beaters at times, but at times with Lane Kiffin, they look like they get bored with who they're playing and they tend to struggle. So I think we need to remember that in college, a lot of teams can get fired up, even when a season's bad, can still get fired up for those games at the end of the year.
I'll take your word for it. I think as much as I like college football, as much as I know college football, I'm probably at fault at this, like you're saying, having the NFL mindset to it. I just don't see. I don't know. I still think A&M will be fine, but the fans, the players, the coaching staff have to look at it from a 3 to 4 year.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you there 100%.
Because they have the talent. All they need to do is just let that talent mature.
No, I agree 100%. And they've got a great one in Devin Achane. He had 99 yards. He's got like 600 and something yards on the year. But we'll have to see. Again, hey, you wanted this. You wanted to go to the SEC. I still contend that if you keep A&M in the Big 12 for the last 10 years, A&M plays for a national championship. and is in a couple of playoffs. But this is what they wanted, and this is what they're getting. All right, let's finish up. We're going to just do some quick hittings on some of the other ones. SMU almost made a splash as they fall short against Cincinnati. Man, that was a weird game because I don't know if you want to call it a comeback as much as, and you put it so great on the run sheet, and I was watching parts of this game. Cincinnati just went weird and just started just stupid penalty after stupid penalty after stupid penalty, and SMU almost were able to get back in, but they couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, hey, as Michael Irvin puts it, it wasn't a comeback, it was a come close. But yeah, 14 penalties by the Bearcats is not going to cut it. They're, the last they made the playoffs this year, they're off to a good start. Only have one loss. I think it was Arkansas early, the first game of the year.
Yep.
But SMU, they've had some coaches come and go. I think Sonny Dykes was one of them as well.
Yep, last year.
They're on the come up. It's just they need a coach to stay there for a little bit longer than 3-4 years,
or they accept what they are and become a really good leaping place for coaches who are young coaches. You can do that and be successful. I think the first thing SMU has done correctly is they've at least had 10 years of not being terrible, and that's a huge step. They also were brilliant, and Dykes did this, and Chad Morris even started it. They've done a better job of recruiting Dallas athletes, and that means DISD athletes, and that means Plano athletes, and all that. And they have a great marketing where they wear the Dallas uniforms a couple times a year. And so I think SMU knows where they're at, and I think that they're in a really good place with that. Now, if they're going to try to be like winning national championships and stuff, well, then they might as well get back to cheating because they're never going to be that. They can be, though, a Division I fun team that wins 8 to 10 games a year, goes to bowl games, has fun offenses, and that kind of stuff.
I will say this was probably one of the prettier uniform games of the week.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Cincinnati has a very underrated look. And SMU, I've always thought, has a great look. I don't care what anybody says. I know it's simple, but the running Mustang is just perfect. And they've always had a great color coordination. Even when I've liked it when they went with the blue helmet and the red helmet. But I really like their Dallas helmet. When they have the Dallas logo for the city on it, I think it looks really, really good. Houston and Navy was a good uniform game, and that was a great game. A lot of people thought Navy was going to win. Houston's had the weirdest year. You want to talk about A&M expectations. Houston legitimately thought that they were going to be playing themselves into a playoff spot this year. Now they're just trying to get 7 wins on the year.
Hey, I agree with you. I remember them coming into the season. I think they were ranked in the low 20s, but you look at their schedule before the season started, you felt that they could run the table. And then here comes Texas Tech in week 2. They make that trip to play them, and they lose 33-30, and that kind of started the trend where they lost 3 or 4. I think the Kansas loss kind of shook them a little bit, but seeing how Kansas ended up being wasn't that bad. And then but I mean, they're 4-3. Honestly, if you look at their losses, Texas Tech, Joey McGuire's a great coach. It looks like the Red Raiders are on the come up. Kansas, Leopold, great coach. Kansas is on the come up. Tulane, shocking everybody. They only have 1 loss this year. They are a ranked team. So you look at their 3 losses, those are good quality losses. The Kansas one was kind of a blowout, the 18 points, but overall, Houston doesn't look that bad.
Yeah, but again, no expectations. They thought that they were very open about that they were going to break down the playoff door. Like this was the year. And they had the schedule, and maybe we should have learned when they barely beat UTSA. And Jeff Traylor's doing great things at UTSA. They had a great win against UNT this week. But Houston, if you're thinking you're a playoff team, you should be able to go into UTSA and win by 3 or 4 touchdowns. But yeah, again, that outsized expectations when you collar that on a program. You can turn like if they win out, and they very well could win out. You're right; they're going to have a good record. They're going to be 9-3 or something. Go to a bowl, but where they think they should be, that's where you start to have coaches leave, Players don't want to live into that stress and stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how they respond, the fans, how they respond to the rest of the year. And as we talked about UTSA, they had a big win. Hey, look at Rice. Luke McCaffrey. Yes, that is McCaffrey's brother. They win 42-41. He had 171 yards and 2 touchdowns. Hey, look, for Rice, that is a quality win against a not terrible Louisiana Tech team.
Hey, Luke McCaffrey is 6'2", so
yes.
Look out for him in the NFL in a couple of years. I think he's a sophomore now. He transferred over from middle school, but he has the size, and obviously he has his dad's hands. So I'm kind of excited to see how Rice does next year. I think they're 4-3 right now, so there's some promise for that university.
Yep, UTSA again. They had a comeback win over North Texas, 31-27. UTEP with a win. Hey, look at UTEP for a program that not too long ago had lost like 20 out of 24 games. They've actually been playing decent. They win 24-21. Deion Hankins had 138 yards. Texas State lost because of Frank Gore Jr. Or maybe it is Frank Gore. You know, I could see Frank Gore be like, you know what, I'm not done playing football. I'm going to pretend I'm used to it. and they both look like they're 40, so you can't really change it. You can't say that's them. But no, Texas State has struggled. They've struggled since they've made the move to D1. They're one of the programs that I don't get why a lot of them, including my alma mater, A&M Commerce, though A&M Commerce is having a solid year as a D1 team. I don't get why so many Texas schools jumped up to D1 in the last couple of years. But anyway, week 9 games, TCU at West Virginia. I have TCU.
Oh, yeah, I have TCU as well. That big win going against the West Virginia team that just got blown out by Tech. I could see it being close early, like in the first quarter, but then TCU will assert itself and win by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I kind of see it exactly like that. Baylor at Texas Tech. I have Baylor. I think Baylor's defense is better than Houston's and better than Texas's, and that's where those two teams lost the game against Texas Tech. I like Baylor to win, but I think it'll be ugly, and I wouldn't shock me if it goes into overtime.
I agree with everything you said except for the winner.
You like Tech? I have no problem with that. I think if they win that game, then Joey McGuire has now got to that Mike Leach level where you just think Texas Tech is going to win anytime they play any good team at home.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Lubbock's going to be the hot spot the next few years.
And then, I don't want to go that far. Have you ever been out there? No. And then I'm going to go with the upset. I think A&M will beat Ole Miss. Ole Miss lost to LSU last week, and I think that really derailed. And even though they technically can still make all their goals, if they were to win out, they're going to be in the playoffs. But I think this is the absolute time a Lane Kiffin team always seems to get tripped up, and I think A&M's starting to get angry. And I think we're going to see a mean Aggie football team at home. So give me the Aggies in the upset.
Well, since they had 8 penalties, that were all false starts after they had a new center last week against South Carolina. If they get that fixed, then I think A&M can win. If they don't, Ole Miss wins. I think that's a determining factor in this week's game.
This podcast is certified fresh. FreshMediaWorks.com.
And once again, I want to thank Junior's Smokehouse for being the title sponsor of the Lone Star College Football Show. I look forward to telling you more about them each and every episode. Hey, if you want coverage of your school or just want to give a shout out to your team, leave us a voicemail at 713-568-6361 and we'll play it out on the show. That number again is 713-568-6361. Also, do us a favor and give us a rating and review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. We will also read out the best reviews on the air. Until next time, I'm Chris Daly reminding you to get out there and enjoy some football.